Coach Chat. Hey, Steve.
Hello.
All right, so today we're going to go through, and I know we've gone through this before, we've talked about individualization and programs heaps.
Yep.
Because, you know, when you're actually trying to make someone really strong, it is all about the individualized process of what you're doing with them in their program.
Yep.
And what you're doing, you know, with them, with your communication, your feedback and all that. I guess if you don't know, Steve and I have recently been on Powerlifting Now, where we talked about the differences between heavyweight and lightweight lifters. We went through, you know, general characteristics, frequency, intensity, volume, and then we showed a couple of our blocks that we work with. When we work through that, so if you haven't listened to that and you want to subscribe to Powerlifting Now, go for it. If you are subscribed to Powerlifting Now, check it out. When we went through that, it was quite general, yeah?
Yeah, with just different weight classes or different size of people, that was quite general in the way that we explained that and went over things.
Yeah.
But I guess there's like deeper understanding of it, individualization.
Yep.
And the way that we'll go about that with different, you know, we've got different leverages of people as well.
Yeah.
And then there's gender specific things. There's lots of things to consider when we're writing up programs for people, right?
Yeah, so I guess if you listen to that, that's kind of like the overarching rules that we're looking for when we're dealing with heavyweight and lightweight lifters, you know, and males and females.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, lightweight lifters can handle more and females can handle more. That's very general characteristics. So when you're diving deeper into individualization, I mean, I guess first we can go over those general characteristics. So Steve, you get a new lifter, you know, and you get a new athlete, they come to you, hey, I want to be coached by you. What are some things that you're going to be looking at as kind of like stage one of the program?
I guess the first thing we'll look at is like previous training data, if they have any and what they believe has worked in the past. And then I obviously have my own biases, which I'll lean towards at the same time and discuss with them if they've tried anything like that. And then we'll look at, you know, obviously the size of someone, their leverages as well, the way that they lift, training age, all those kinds of things, and then try and come up with something together to start with, and then over time that will change. But just that first kind of initial program will be based on like the heuristics of someone and what I have, I guess, already worked with in the past that will lead to what I'm going to initially write for someone. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how other coaches do it, but I think that's a big point of difference, I think, for us is we don't mind running the first part of the program or the first initial micro with our own biases, but then asking the athlete what works for you.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, like, especially with a higher level.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable writing something that they know has worked for them in the past and then forming my own opinions about that, like how's that going to go or what I think may or may not work. But then if we've got time, just running with it.
Yeah, running with it, especially to start with, and then you can just like tinker with it as you're going. And it's like, it becomes this product eventually of what started off with what they believe would work. So the buy-in is there 100%, and then it's just been tinkered with. So it's still almost the same kind of product, the same program, but it's just had your twist on it or our twist on it. So then it's like, you've just noticed different trends, you've accumulated more data, and you've been able to make, you know, adjustments based on that. And then we have this final kind of product that we like blended all together that works really well. Yeah,
well, a lot of the times it's just that if an athlete can have a blueprint of what they think worked, and our tinkering with it might be just controlling fatigue a little bit better or a little bit more. You know, like for instance, athlete, you know, I say to you, I always get results when I deadlift twice a week, but it tanks me. And I don't know why. And then you ask them, okay, so what were you doing? And then I'll say to you, I was doing 4x6 on one day and 5x5 on the other day.
Yeah.
Straight sets. Okay, cool. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to give you 4x6 and 5x5, but I'm going to give you a top set with a really big back down.
Yeah.
There's my point. You get what I mean? Like that's my spin on it.
Yeah, well, just that, you know, I'm going to prescribe one of those days rather than just like keep it RPE based or something like that, like keep it low threshold.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the major things when, you know, you're looking at creating the first part of the process with moving towards individualization is listening to what the athlete has told you that works.
Yeah. Because
I think it's really important to understand when you more you work with higher level, or the more people you work with, you realize that the weirdest things work.
Yeah.
The weirdest things work. And if they're telling you, I feel really good when I do this, no matter what it is, do it.
Yeah.
If you've got time.
Especially, that buy-in, like I said, is going to be there. And it's like, everyone's program is their own program. The way that they respond is the way that they respond. And what can look completely unorthodox or very strange on paper can just work for someone.
Yep. And we're talking more from like an intermediate to advanced level person that comes to you now. If you're a coach and you are working with a bunch of novices or people who have only lifted for less than 1 year, of course, it's okay for you to come up with a blueprint because they probably won't have the training data on themselves that you can use.
Yeah.
Or, I find a lot of the times, sometimes if someone says to me, oh, this just works, and I don't have a problem saying, we'll run this for a couple of blocks and then we'll get back together and see if this is working.
Yeah, and there's things outside of that too that create it more individualized too, like is this person encounter some sort of roadblock at some point if we go past a certain threshold, or like does that just need to be adjusted just a tiny bit?
Yeah.
So then like they can say like, oh, I get like fantastic results running this, but it's like, could they be better if we just make this tiny adjustment here?
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm getting at. Let them run with it and go, okay, this is what I think might happen. We'll run with it and see, and if this tiny adjustment is something that does work, I'll let you know. So that's kind of like, previous training data, and then we've got things like sex, so gender, size, leverages, training age, as we said before.
Yep.
Externals.
Yeah, what someone does for a living can be a big thing as well, play a big role and a big factor in the way that you'll program them, because they may not be able to train as many days as you'd like them to, or they could be shift worker and it could be all over the place, like the shift workers that I have. It's almost like hit your main days when you feel best.
Yeah. Not
like you need to train these specific days, and this is, like I know you talk about predictability and the outcome of all that, of training on specific days, but it's just not feasible for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess that's kind of like step one. And I know there's a lot of information out there on how to build your first micro. We've done webinars on it before.
Yeah.
But like if you're working with people who have a really good training history, let them help you build the first micro.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't try and come up with something brand new, because a lot of the times when you come up with something brand new and there's no buy-in there, it won't last.
Yeah, for sure.
Or there is come up with something brand new and they've never run it before, it can get really messy.
It can get messy and it can lead to almost injury sometimes if it's that vastly different to what they have ran before.
Yeah.
Because you've just made too many adjustments and their body's not adapted or built that resilience up to be able to handle that much if you're doing more.
Yeah, and listening in the first block.
Yeah, for sure. Listening and paying attention.
Yeah.
Should be done all the time, but I think that first block is very critical, just for buy-in and just establishing a relationship with someone as well.
Yeah. How often do you run the first block back to back? You run the same thing over and over?
Depending on how the results were, I can run it back to back a couple of times, but if the results, like if we didn't really go anywhere or anything, then I will make adjustments straight to that second block. But they'll be minor, and that's how I meant with like over time. So we start with what we write, based on all the information provided at the start, and we write that initial block, and then we run that, and then if something, let's say we have fantastic luck with deadlifts, so it's like I'm not going to change anything there, but squats were a bit ordinary, we didn't really go anywhere, so I may make some adjustments there with the squat, and it'll just be built over time, and then say the second block something else didn't go so well, so I'll make some small adjustments there, or maybe different accessories that we need to add in. And that's how over time we get this person's kind of golden micro that we're trying to look for that whole time.
I think so like when you're trying to find that golden micro, which is the individualization and making those small adjustments, I think one of the biggest things to remember is small adjustments for a lot of people, especially when they're really strong, lead to big outcomes.
Yeah, in either direction.
In either direction. So you might change something so small, which would be an accessory.
Yeah.
So I can't change Meg's accessories.
Yeah.
Her lower body, she's able to hack squat now. Belt squat, no.
Yeah.
Cannot do it. Just throws the whole thing off. So, and I think Sean's posted on that before. The higher level the athlete, the more you change the accessories, the more it really affects what's happening with the primary lifts.
Yeah, for sure.
Either way. I think big thing for you has been taking the 3 squat down to 2.
I'm only squatting
Once. Well, when you're in comp prep.
Yeah.
You know, like, how did that feel in general?
That's hard to explain because I'm not comp squatting at all at the moment.
Yeah.
I still believe that I need to squat 3 times.
Yeah. It's your golden.
Yeah, that's where things fly. But like I'm really only putting a barbell on my back once a week, so it's like I don't exactly know. But at the same time, like I'm so invested in squatting 3 times, like that's where I feel that's worked.
Yeah.
But like I'm squatting once a week now and still getting good results. So
Yeah.
I'm not phased by it at the same time. Although I would like to get back to 3 times comp squatting, but I'm so far away from that right now. I'm not even comp squatting once a week at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, going back to it. Sorry, I went on a tangent then. So like, when we're moving towards individualization, making changes block to block, right? The more blocks you run with people, the smaller the changes you want to make. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and when we're saying changes, we're talking about things like small things, like rep ranges.
Yeah. Tiny.
RPE progression changes.
Yeah.
Not big overhauls, like changing the way, changing the whole structure of the micro, moving around primary and secondary days. I'm only going to do that if we've done it. I probably only do that usually after running a few back to back or after a competition.
Yeah, after a competition, I will make some adjustments.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because of the monotony of training.
Yeah.
But if something's worked really well, then probably not really
Yes.
either. If they're like really invested in powerlifting, they understand that like boring.
Yeah. So I think one of the big ticket things that we just said then is moving towards individualization is less big changes, more smaller changes.
Yeah.
Because the more big changes that are made, the less individualized that the program is getting because it gets super messy.
Yeah, and then you look back and you don't know what you've changed over time.
Yeah. Falling into that trap sucks.
Yeah, and it's just like acknowledging when things feel better or worse. Like I have a lifter at the moment where I tried everything to get this squat day to show up, but he just kept reporting like it wasn't feeling good.
Right.
But the secondary day was feeling good.
Just make secondary the primary.
So then we flipped it, but it was like I still adjusted things based on we had a good performing block.
Yep.
So we still had that good performing block, so I knew that
Yep.
it's possible.
Yeah.
I still adjusted like over 3 blocks to try and get this squat to show up on the day that I wanted it to, but I just couldn't. So now we've just kind of flipped it to the Monday, just like reverse things around, and that was probably a big change that I made.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't usually make. Like I'd rather just make those small adjustments from block to block to try and get it to perform the day that we wanted to.
Yeah.
And then we had to do that big flip, which can then make more interference throughout the rest of the week now. Which is why I don't really like doing that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest important things when you are making changes to move towards more individualization is having a theory in your head of what will happen if it works and what will happen if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So thinking, if this doesn't work, I think this would happen.
Yeah.
So let's just say you move that primary to the Monday. In your head, you might be thinking, this may tank deadlifts.
Yeah, this can have a really adverse effect on the other lifts. Like, that was kind of why it's the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Whereas the way that everything else was going great.
Yeah.
So it's all moving upwards.
Yeah.
But we just couldn't get that squat to perform as well as we wanted it to.
Yeah.
So I'd rather tinker with other things and make small adjustments and changes.
Yep.
To get that day, I think it's Thursday, to be higher performing.
Yep.
rather than I think it's the Sunday or Monday, just because of what could happen around that. And so weighing up the pros and cons, right? So the cons were just outweighing all the pros of the squat performing well.
Yeah.
And then eventually it got to a point where it's like, no, we got to bite the bullet and I've got to see what happens.
Yep.
Because I can always revert back.
Yep.
But at the same time, I needed to see.
Did it work?
We haven't finished yet.
Oh, okay. So you're still seeing?
Yeah.
So your theory is it may tank the other lifts?
Yeah, so we got the pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
Pros is obviously squat starts performing really well.
Yeah.
And then nothing else gets affected. Like that's an ideal world.
That's what you want.
That's exactly what I want. But then we have the cons of squat doesn't perform that well, and it interferes with other things. So we've almost like taken a step back, and then we have to revert back again. Or it can be squat performs well, and then I have to go and figure out everything around that to make sure everything else is performing well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also a really big, a good thing for athletes to remember is themselves. If you're asking your coach for changes, make sure it's something that you've thought about yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, like I just had an athlete who competed on the weekend, bench 17.5 kilo increase, like went so well. Like in my head, all I needed to do was change the secondary squat day. To make squats show up. He wanted all these other changes to fit other days. I was like, no, I can't. We're 7 weeks out now.
Yeah,
I'm not changing anything. But it was more, he was thinking about more of his other life.
Oh, okay.
And thinking that, not understanding that even though bench felt shit in training, it performed really well on the platform. So it tapered really well.
Yeah.
So I'm not changing it. Do you get what I mean? So explaining that. Whereas, if before or a few years ago or whatever, I might have gotten the trap where I'd be like, okay, let's make these changes and see what happens.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But now I'm like, no, it's working. Don't change a thing.
Yeah, if something's working, you don't need to change it. And that's like, I think we touched on quite a few times, is like sometimes the biggest change is no change.
Yeah.
That's the best change.
Yeah. So what are some things we're looking out for when we're making change towards trying to get to more of an individualized effect?
I guess, like I touched on earlier, it's looking at the performance of the lift and the way that it's kind of tracking throughout a block. So there's so many different changes that we can make. You can make, you could add a set somewhere or manipulate the reps that someone's doing. So, if we manipulate the reps downwards, obviously intensity is going to go up, load on the bar is going to go up. If you're adding more set, you're just doing overall more volume.
Yeah.
And then that can be like the sweet spot where someone responds.
Yeah.
But then it can also be like acknowledging, okay, we ran this person's blocks for 5 to 6 weeks and we keep fizzling out on the 4th week or something.
Yeah.
So acknowledging that, and that's an adjustment in itself, just like rerunning what you've already ran, but running it for less weeks.
That's what I'm doing with someone else right now, yeah.
Yeah. So just picking up on all the little trends that you're acknowledging as you're going with someone. Like some people that auto-regulating, that I can run their blocks for 8 weeks, 9, 10 weeks, like just because they are that good at auto-regulating, they aren't fixated and attached to load on the bar.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you just touched on then, which is a really big ticket, is changing the reps and sets.
Yeah.
Before changing the structure of the program.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a big one. Like, if the way that the micro is set out is working in terms of, squatting 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, deadlifting Tuesday, Saturday, if that's working, keep it.
Yeah, for sure.
Change the sets and rep schemes or what you're doing with that first before you go, oh, deadlift's not showing up on Saturday, I'll move it to Friday. Because you're changing more if you move the whole thing to Friday.
Yeah.
You might find that deadlift's not showing up on the Saturday because your lifter doesn't respond to 7s.
Yeah.
Give them 5s.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, do that before you end up changing everything because if you change, you change the deadlift one day prior and then squat tanks, then it's like, oh, is it squat tanking because the deadlift was moved or is the squat tanking because there's an extra rest day now?
Yeah, multiple different things.
You know what I mean? So you won't really know. So you're better off changing what you're doing with volume and intensity within those days first before looking outside.
Yeah, I think days of training is one of the last things that I'll change. unless I'm adding a day in for someone.
Yep.
Then it's different. But unless like I've noticed like, okay, this person just, we want to change that day because it's just too close to something else, and I push it back a day. But it's just basically just landing on a rest day. If that was a rest day already, then I've done that quite a few times. But it's rare. It's not the first thing that I'll do. Like I'll try and manipulate all the other variables around it first before I do something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, through this whole podcast and whatever, we've talked about everything that we're doing on our end to create more individualized environments. But the athlete also has a big role in that, and they have a big role in that with load progression.
Yeah, load progression
is massive.
Yeah, the communication around things as well.
Yeah.
And just being able to understand like what our goal is as the coach and what we're trying to achieve, and then also being able to understand, like you said, load progression, but how to regulate. It doesn't have to go up every single week.
No, it doesn't.
You don't have to send it in the last week of a block. There's so many things that you don't have to do because you can create momentum block to block rather than just like sending it on that last week and then you're cooked at the start of the next block. You'd rather come in fresh and being able to just run with momentum again. Because I've got a lot of people that do it. They'll go to the last block of the week and then they just send it.
Yep, and then they got nothing left.
And then we go, and then we get to the first week of the next block, and then they try and what they do is increase what they did on the first week of the block before, and it's like,
too tired.
You're just continuously running into this wall.
Yep.
We're making like small progressions because of the way that you kind of, I guess, try to respond to your own program and just like read last week of the block, or this is the fourth or fifth week or sixth, whatever is the last week.
Yep.
And you think you need to max out. We don't.
Yeah, exactly. And the low progressions week to week are very individualized.
Yeah, for sure.
And can be tinkered with block to block to make it better. You don't need to change what's happening on the actual program. You can look at the load jumps on, let's just say, squatting twice a week and deadlifting, squatting 3 times a week and deadlifting twice a week, and you know, week 4 showed up really well, and then you went 2 more weeks, week 6 didn't. You look at the next block and go, okay, so from week 1 to week 4 you did hit these low jumps, and then week 4 showed up really well. Repeat that again, and then let's see how we go.
Yeah.
Or if it is out of the blue, like you'll go first 3 weeks, and then there's a 20 kilo deadlift jump, and then everything else tanks. It's like, okay, you don't need to jump 20 kilos in that week 3 on your deadlift, because it's not going to be very good for the rest of the block.
Yeah, or that week in general.
So it's nothing we did, it's more like, okay, explaining, you know, we need to improve and individualize your low jumps with your deadlift a little bit more, which is going to suit you.
Yeah, which comes around the education around the program, coach-athlete relationship as well.
Yeah.
But there's also, if you're going to finish a block, like right, you know, at like what you're capable of, like basically hitting an RPE 10 at the end of the block, even if that wasn't prescribed, you don't have to start the next block heavier than what you started the block before. But if you're starting with fatigue, like my last block, like I added over 4 weeks 50 kilos to my deadlift single because I just started super light because I didn't feel that great and just made sure that it moved fast.
Yeah.
And then it was just a little jump because I still didn't feel that good into a big jump into a bigger jump.
Yeah, because you let the fatigue dissipate.
Yeah, and if you're not letting it dissipate, you're not letting it roll out or wash out, then you just like are just carrying that fatigue rather than carrying momentum. Yeah,
exactly. So we'll go through a scenario. Like, so when we've been with an athlete for a while and they do a competition and they've run something and it's gone really well, but we know that they just need a couple of changes and then to return back to baseline.
Yeah.
What is that going to look like for their first program after the competition? What are some things that we might change?
Oh, that's when we'll veer away from a bit of what they were responding really well to.
Yeah.
We don't have to go back. Like that's where we want to get back to.
Yep.
But we'll kind of take like 2 steps away from it, so then we can take 2 steps to come back to it. So it's like, let's say if someone's squat responds really well in 6s, we can work back up to 8s or something.
Yep.
And then come down to 7s the next block and work back into that 6s. So it's like that 3 block period or 3 nozo period
Yep.
to get back to where we want to get back to and
Yep.
build the baseline of those 6s up again.
Yeah.
Because if they're responding really well, and when their 6s are going well, their singles are going well too, or their top sets,
Yep.
then it's like, how do we build the baseline of the 6s up, not the single?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a big one. So like, and that can just and even changing the rep ranges up and down does provide a little bit of novelty.
Yep.
Because we know powerlifting is monotonous, we know it's boring, but you might change a secondary squat day to a high bar and add 3 reps.
Yeah.
So that is good for them, and then in 3 blocks time that high bar is going back to that comp squat, back at that range, back at that sweet spot for the rep ranges that they need. But you're veering away from what works, and then going back into it the closer they get to competition.
Yeah, it's like easing back into it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one for when you find that magic micro. There is a time where you do need to veer away from it, and don't be scared of veering away from it. But veering away from it really is only like adding reps, adding a set.
Yeah, it's not much at all.
Making a tempo, changing a pause to a tempo.
Yeah.
Like don't overhaul the whole thing, because if you overhaul the whole thing and then try to go back to the magic micro, you haven't built what is that word? Adapted. You haven't built the adaptations necessary that's needed to get back to that magic micro.
If you've manipulated so many variables, you're right. Like the adaptations just haven't taken place. No natural adaptation across the board would have taken place. So the stimulus that they're now working with isn't going to respond to what you want them to kind of respond to and what they used to respond to. You've almost changed the way that their body is responding in that manner.
Yeah. What we mean by that is kind of like changing the days around.
Yeah, changing the days around, and then manipulating too much, like changing the variation of a lift on both days, all 3 days, rather than just change one. Or changing the rep ranges around on all the days of someone that's squatting or benching or deadlifting.
Yeah, that gets messy.
Yeah, that gets too messy. So it's like just change one of the days around. Like that's how small we're talking about when we're saying we make small tinkers as well. Like we may just change, say if someone's squatting twice a week on either the first day or the second day, we just change like one of the rep ranges around, not both days, to try and get the squat to perform better.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I think that'll do us. So basically, you've got your big heuristics to start with.
Yeah.
And then small tinkers over a long period of time leads you to where you want to be. Don't be scared if it stops working. Veer away and go back.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah,
There's not much more to it. Listen. So listen.